You don't need a muse, you need a workout. Writing isn't magic, it's muscle. And today I've got 3 powerful writing exercises to help you build that muscle fast. Each one comes with an easy mode and a hard mode, so whether you're just starting out or ready to level up, you'll find your challenge. No fluff, no theory, just real practice that transforms your writing right now. My name is Carson Long, and I'm a self-published author who spent the past few years focused on one mission: demystifying storytelling and helping you become a better writer. One of the hardest parts about writing is that it's a war of attrition. It's long form. It can take years to finally finish your book. And because of this, it's extremely beneficial to find smaller, quicker ways to hone your writing skills. Let's look at 3 writing exercises to improve 3 important parts of the craft: detail, prose, and dialogue. One of the core skills of being a writer is to take a thought in your head and create imagery and create detail around it. It's not just a sheriff stepping through the swinging doors of a saloon, it's the smoke drifting through the sunlight, the conversation that falters to the sound of the sheriff's boots, the sweat beading on the forehead of the bartender. When you're writing a scene, in your head, you see so many details. It's a skill to translate that onto the page for your readers. And so if it's a skill, let's find a way to practice it. Have you ever heard of the Snowflake method of creating a plot? Because we're taking a page from that plot framework to create a writing exercise. This is a short writing exercise that stretches out that detail-oriented part of your brain, and it shouldn't take you longer than 10 minutes. By the way, feel free to post some of your writing in the comments below and let me see what you were able to do. Here's how it works. Write a 1-sentence idea for a scene. And this can be as ambitious or mundane as you want it to be. Feel free to use my example: a sheriff walks into a saloon to confront an outlaw. It's simple, not much of an exercise yet, but now take that 1 sentence and extrapolate that into a paragraph, ideally 3 to 6 sentences. This exercise requires you to generate a bunch of action and detail and imagery related to that one idea of a scene. You have to fill in all the blanks. Now you have a scene that's told in a paragraph. The sheriff enters the saloon, everyone stops what they're doing. There's a tense conversation between the sheriff and the outlaw, and both parties agree to a duel at high noon. Okay, well, what happens next? Now we take each sentence of that scene and we write a new paragraph of detail. This should leave you with a scene that's 3 to 6 paragraphs long, maybe even a couple hundred words. Each time that you expand the scene, you're doing a couple of things. First, you're creating a more vivid world. And second, you're slowing down the story through detail, which is a critical skill of a writer. You slow down the story when the detail around the action is important, and you speed up the story when the action is the focus. This is a tool that you use with every sentence you write. Do you get to the next point of action right away, or do you slow down the story with description? For the hard mode of this challenge, write the same scene again. Expand that single sentence into a paragraph, but this time, do it from a different perspective. All of the action should be the same, but the detail should be wildly different. What would the sheriff notice that the bartender wouldn't, and vice versa? At the end of this challenge, you should have 2 identical scenes that focus on very different details. Again, this comes from the Snowflake plot framework, which uses the same idea to describe an entire plot of a story before you write it. The central idea of the plot is that 1 sentence, and now you expand it through paragraphs and then multiple paragraphs, and then eventually you have an entire detailed plot. One of the hardest things to learn as a writer is the idea of prose, the words that you choose to describe your story. When do you use so-called purple prose, and when do you use more direct prose? If you've never heard of purple prose, this is the idea of writing with more elaborate language choices. Instead of the sheriff burst through the saloon doors with a growl, you might have the bat-winged doors of the saloon creaked open with a groan that echoed through the hollow hush of the afternoon, stirring the sun-drenched motes of dust into a lazy dance beneath shafts of golden light. This isn't good or bad, it's all just style. Writers like Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote the Kingkiller Chronicle, he has a writing style that's based on his poetic style. It's an incredible experience to read an author who embraces that style of language. Guy Gavriel Kay is another example of that style, and yet a more direct style is just as great, like Michael Crichton or Fonda Lee. The core of prose like this is what I call sensory writing. Writing beyond what you see to include details that reach all 5 senses: sight, touch, taste, hearing, and smell. This is a classic writing exercise that you might have done in your writing classes growing up, and it should be. Presenting this kind of detail in your story is the difference between writing visually, which would be like the reader watching your story like a movie, and placing the reader in your world so that they can experience it. I'm gonna give you an easy mode and a hard mode of this exercise, and let's start with the easy. Take your list of 5 senses and write out a scene. With each detail that you add to the story, cross off the sense that you've used. You can even use the same scene that we just built in the previous exercise. And by the end of the scene, you should have every sense marked off. Warning, do not try to hit every single sense back to back. Your scene should not read, "The sheriff saw this, he smelled that, he heard this other thing." That's not good. You want each sense to be represented in the scene organically, naturally. It shouldn't feel out of place. For a harder challenge, try to represent each sense with descriptions that aren't usually used with that sense. For example, a smell being described as heavy or rough or thick. This kind of ambiguity in your writing is not a bad thing. Using this style of description and sense lets the reader interpret that information in a totally different way, where they pull from their own experiences of what kind of smell would be described as heavy. It makes the reader participate in your story, and that's crazy. The final exercise comes from our lovely friend George R.R. Martin, author of A Song of Ice and Fire, and it has to do with dialogue. And I am of the firm belief that dialogue is the most useful technique that you can use in your writing. It's not just what characters say. It's the subtext. It's how character relationships are formed. It's how we should be doing exposition and world building. It is the most important thing to master as an author. Famously though, it's also hard to get right. So here's George R.R. Martin's exercise for crafting unique dialogue. And luckily, this might be the most fun writing exercise I've come across. Martin recommends to come up with 6 or so characters. Give them a little description, make them fairly different from each other, and it can be as simple as a soldier, a baker, and a wizard, or you can take this chance to actually come up with 6 detailed characters. That's just a fun part of writing. And then here's the exercise. Easy mode is to write a monologue for each character. Just straight dialogue, no action, no description, just the words. And the goal is that each monologue should be different enough and written in a unique enough way that the reader should be able to identify which character said which monologue. Of course, if you have friends to share this with, then that's a fun thing you can do, but feel free to post your own monologue and your characters below. Here are some things to avoid. Do not write in accents. That's cheating. You can't rely on presenting an accent through dialogue as a way to make that unique for a character. It needs to be through the word choice, through how things are phrased and discussed, and the subtext of the character. Also, the goal here is to make natural sounding dialogue that just kind of comes across as unique. Now, easy mode allows you to write a different monologue for each character. But if you think you're up for it, here's the hard mode. Write the same monologue for each character, hitting all the same points and details, but twist that same monologue in a way that's unique for each character. If you're really wanting a challenge, you can even choose 2 characters at random and create a dialogue between them. No dialogue tags, no identifying details, but each character should be identifiable by the end of the conversation. The more natural the conversation, the better. I personally love the way that George R.R. Martin understands and describes story. If you want to explore more of his writing concepts, check out our video on how Martin puts together a villain, link in the description. And if you want more story breakdowns and content on writing, be sure to like and subscribe for more updates from Storylab.